I get them released out of Egypt. I'm kind of doing a quick synopsis of it, and they go through the wilderness, and they arrive in the promised land. God fulfills His promise and gives the children of Israel their land, the land that He promised Abraham and Shechem and the whole area of Israel. God gave to them. And it was remarkable how God did that. But God promised Abraham that He would make him a father of a great nation, and He promised him the land. God fulfilled His promise. It took a little time. Took what on the slower, and so they asked for a king. And remember what God said when God felt against him, that they were choosing a king over him, that they no longer wanted God king, but a lot of women. The place to the temple as well for different gods. And then it came some of us, Rehoboam. And you remember what the other guy said? Hey, listen, your father made decisions. We were taxed. We're taxed outright. We have forced laborers, and and we just don't like the way we're living now. So you need to lower the taxes, and you need to end forced labor, and that didn't go so well. He went and so Rehoboam asked his advisors what he could do. Okay, we're all caught up, right? We're all caught up. But I really just want to focus on this upper story and lower story and really drill that in, because I think that's really important to us to recognize that God is 194, and I want to read that scripture passage in 194. I think it's 1 Kings chapter 16 as well. I think that's where it is, 194. 194. I'm going to read this. This is when Rehoboam says, I think I'm going to go talk to my friends, my buddies, and his younger guys says, hey, you need to go ahead and you need to put the hammer on them. You need to make it on them. And here's 194. On the very bottom one. It's jumping out. The king refused to listen to them. They answered the king and David. And while part of Jesse's sons went home, the Israelites who were living in the towns of Judah, Rehoboam. Then when Rehoboam arrived in Jerusalem, left and moved, he ended up in Shechem. And Shechem is where he set out with Isaac to go sacrifice Isaac. Shechem. So it's a very sacred place, Shechem. So Shechem was headquarters of versus the kingdom of Judea, and the kingdom of Judea. And why is it Judea? I thought it was Israel, and I'd get all confused. And then you begin all the prophets, and it was a prophet of Israel, but not the prophet of Israel of Judea. What's the difference? And it was hard to read when you get into the prophets, and you get into the two kingdoms. And I want to make sure that's important. See, the Bible is written where it's not chronologically written. You have the first few books in the Bible that they're chronological, they're historical and chronological in writing. But then you get to the poetry and you get to the prophets, and it starts talking. It's more topical, and it's not chronological. Because you think it's chronological, but it's not. And they start talking about two different kingdoms, and they talk about two different areas, and they talk about so many kings, and my head explodes because it doesn't make sense. But it's important for us to understand this, because when we read those prophets, and we're going to talk about this on Sunday and really next week, that these prophets, it really begins to unfold and really begins to make... Again, there were 10 tribes that ruled over, that Jeroboam ruled over, 10 tribes up north. Now, the Sea of Galilee, That's important. You remember the Sea of Galilee? The Jordan River runs between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. And then, so 10 tribes, 13. If you want to talk, if you look at Solomon's, see, the reality, I'm sorry, I'm scattered right now, folks. I want to talk about the division again. It's easy for us to blame Rehoboam for the division because he didn't listen to the proper advisors and he didn't lighten the load for the people. But I don't think that's fair because I think, like I said on Sunday, that the division started long before Rehoboam. I mentioned this on Sunday that the division actually started with Solomon. Solomon was the one that built the temples. Solomon was the one that had the heavy tax load. Solomon was the one that started the forced labor. So the ripple effect really started with Solomon. There's an old military crash. So if you look at if you go back to chapter 13, I want to go back to chapter 13, page 192. Paragraph says, the Lord became angry, although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods. Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. So the Lord is out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom. See if I have no. I've got a cool picture I wanted to show you. But I don't have it up here. All right. I guess it didn't, thanks to the internet. All right. There is actually any questions with this? I've beaten this quite a bit. Are there any questions with this? How confused are you? What surprises you with this? Thoughts? Yes.
Something that came up in our Sunday school class was the relevance of generational curses and generational blessings. So David, there was a blessing that David carried. David got the blessing, because they didn't destroy Solomon.
With that. And then roaring 20s, but then the war happened again. And people were grieving again and needed to be ministered to. So the church got quiet again, and the Methodist Church, and organized, and great organized institution that weren't focusing on, really saving lives and really the power of what, the vital message of what we have to share, the importance of the relationship with God does and the difference. And so we became this institution that just really sat still and just enjoyed people returning to church. Church in a large way has gotten kind of off center of trusting and believing and what that means to really trust and obey God. I mean, we listen to what God demanded and asked calves, sacrificing to the calves he had made. Sense, right? Any questions? He started just building temples, and he began to make sacrifices to other gods. Now that's that's times it from Judea to Bethel, as Jeroboam was standing by the altar to make it, came from Judea. So what type of man was it? A man of God. A man that was staying true to Rehoboam, because Judea is where? Down south. It was going up to Israel now that was worshiping other gods. Okay, so there's a lot that we can learn. See, it's important when we read a city or a location or Judea. Judea is not necessarily a great place, but it's better, all right? But it's a man of God that come from Judea. So or a geographic area, that there's a history with that. If we told someone, from Bedai, right? A whole big difference, right? I don't even have to say anything. Just by the name Beverly Hill versus Bedice, there's differences, right? So when you read names, locations, cities, because just like when you read that sentence, God is trying to tell us something from Judea. That's the man of God from Judea. Where? All right. What the man of God cried out against the altar of Bethel. He stretched out his hand. Okay, when King Jeroboam heard what the man of God cried out against the altar at Bethel, he stretched out his hand from the altar and said, "Seize him!" Pull it back. So the altar was split apart and its ashes poured out according to the sign given by the man of God, by the word of the Lord. Then the king said to the man of God, "Intercede with the Lord your God and pray for me that my hand may be restored." So the man of God interceded with the Lord, and the king's hand was restored and became as it was before. I want to stop there. I'm going to give you just a moment. I'm going to encourage you to but God heals him. God gives him a second, third, fourth. Gave him another chance, right? What else did you hear? Very good. Very good.
That the man makes you know that the man of God is God.
Who did he cry out to? The man of God, right? Jersey cow to come and heal him. He didn't. And just that short paragraph, and you just kind of do that. If you just take time, Lyle Lovett has a wonderful song. It says, "God will, but I won't. God does, but I don't." And that's the difference between God and me. It's a great song. But yeah, you're right. All right, the next paragraph. Even after this, Jeroboam did not change his evil ways, but once more appointed priests for the high places from all. And Jeroboam said to his wife, "Go disguise yourself so that you won't be recognized as a wife of Jeroboam." They go to Shiloh, and Abijah, when it came down to it, when he needed healing, he called out to God. When his son needed healing, he called out to God. Now A.H., the prophet, her son, for he's ill, and you're to give her such and such an answer. When she arrives, she will pretend to be someone else. So when the prophet heard the sound of her footstep at the door, he said, "Come in, wife of Jeroboam." Come on in. "Why this preaching among the people, and appointed you rule over my people, Israel? I tore the king away from the house of David and gave it to you, but you have not more evil than all who lived before you. You have made for yourself other gods, idols,